In the post-apocalyptic world where the film opens, human avarice has led to an extraordinary rise in sea level. The majority of the planet is underwater in the year 2063. There are now just 2 continents left, and they are at war with one another for resources and territory. The Sentinel is the name of a military installation located in the middle of the ocean between the 2 landmasses. 4 troops from one of the continents make up the team that controls it. Private Sullivan, Corporal Cassidy, and Private Baines are with the group under the command of Sergeant Hendricks, a hard and demanding man. For a period of 2 years, their primary duty is to guard a nuclear bomb at the outpost. The one advantage their continent has over its adversaries is this weapon of mass destruction. They are currently 3 months past the end of their 2-year deal. To their great frustration, the gang has been left waiting for the relieving crew to arrive and pick them up. As food on board the Sentinel grows limited, tensions among the soldiers are high. Thus, on a particularly wet night, Cassidy and Sullivan make the decision to go fishing. They perform quite well, catching a lot of fish in their large net. Hendricks, their superior commander, observes a strong storm moving at the outpost in the meantime. He requests that Baines, who oversees the equipment, secure the nuclear bomb as quickly as feasible. However, at that very moment the waves become large and strong, damaging the outpost's pipelines. In his haste to fix them, Baines gets his hand trapped between 2 pipes. Thankfully, he manages to extricate himself with some effort. The fishing net and the priceless fish are washed away by the waves onto the deck. Just as the soldiers are about to enter, a massive wave strikes the building. It shakes as a result, forcing water into each opening. When the storm passes, though, the Sentinel remains intact. During breakfast the following day, the group talks about how to use their resources less. Baines questions why they don't call for help and tell the relief team to move quickly. However, Hendricks dismisses this idea without delay. The telegraph, which transmits messages using Morse code, is the only means of contact between the Sentinel and the mainland. They should only use it to submit daily reports to their base headquarters, the sergeant informs them. Then he requests that they focus on the repairs. Sullivan then uses the telegraph to make the daily report. Only the possibility of an enemy attack is to be reported, per the sergeant's orders. Sullivan notifies the base, however, that nothing noteworthy has happened on the Sentinel. The reply message claims there are no events on the base either. This is recorded by Sullivan in an official journal, which indicates that nothing has happened on either side for a few months. He eventually joins Hendricks on deck to perform lookout duties. He picks up a pair of binoculars and idly surveys the nearby waterways. He is shocked to learn that a ship is getting closer to the outpost. After examining the radar, Cassidy, who is in the command center, confirms it as well. The sergeant is concerned about this because he thinks it could be the enemy. He gives Sullivan a gun as a result and instructs him to board a small boat to the ship. If he notices any adversaries on board, he is supposed to slip in and notify them. Even though the task is risky, Sullivan takes off right away and heads toward the ship. When he gets close enough, he yells out for any potential passengers. However, he gets no response, so he has to board the ship and start looking into things. Static signals on his radio start to shriek loudly as he is about to enter. In order not to notify the potential enemy inside, Sullivan switches it off. But when he looks around the ship, he senses a problem. There is unfinished food in the cabinets, the radio is broken, and everything is covered with grime. Hendricks reaches out to him in the interim to inquire about his whereabouts. However, Sullivan doesn't respond since he has turned off his radio. The private discovers 4 life jackets intended for the Sentinel's crew back on board the ship. He then understands that the ship was intended to carry their relieving crew. However, they experienced an odd event and vanished. Sullivan and the other 3 have so lost their opportunity to return home. Conversely, an agitated Hendricks begins to believe that the private has been attacked. Thus, he intends to set off the nuclear bomb prior to the adversary getting close to the Sentinel. Then he asks Cassidy for one of the explosive's launch keys. The sergeant reminds her that they have to follow this process even though she is hesitant. Hendricks receives the key from her, combines it with his own, and begins setting off the explosion. However, he makes one final attempt to get in touch with Sullivan before entering the launch code. Thank goodness, the private has turned his radio back on and is responding. Cassidy observes with relief as the sergeant terminates the nuclear protocol. He claims he's keeping both though when she requests for her key back. In reality, he's punishing her for her reluctance to obey his commands. Sullivan then drags the ship over to the Sentinel. Hendricks prohibits the private from informing the base about this ship until they get further details. The crew is infuriated by this, and it's clear that they are growing weary of Hendricks' behavior, especially now that he is in possession of both keys. Following a brief shower, the sergeant records all of the coordinates and examines the ship's navigation history. He then uses a map to apply them in order to determine the possible route the ship may have taken. A communication that Sullivan transmitted to the base behind Hendricks' back is revealed to Cassidy and Bailey in the meanwhile. When they do their regular conversation tomorrow, they will have a response. Hendricks discovers his 3 subordinates suspiciously waiting by the telegraph the following morning. Because eventually the truth will surface, Bailey spills the beans. The sergeant becomes enraged by this, but before he can act, an answer is sent through the telegraph. In actuality, Sullivan's message from last night is exactly the same. Everyone can now see that they haven't spoken to the base in a very long time. Sullivan's daily message of no events has been repeated by the telegraph. But in spite of this alarming discovery, Hendricks gives the order for everyone to return to their jobs. Sullivan witnesses Baines returning from the ship one evening. After that, the two settle down to talk over drinks. Baines acknowledges that he has been entering the ship covertly and says he is certain he can make it right. Sullivan hurries to tell Cassidy the news and invites her to go with them, excited about the possibility of getting away. However, she doesn't think he's sincere, and she's not willing to work behind the sergeant's back. The following day, Sullivan and Baines enter the ship covertly to assist in fixing the engine. They work for hours until they eventually succeed in getting it going. When they eventually exit the ship with joy, Hendricks is waiting for them. At first, he chastises them for disobeying his commands and wasting time on unrelated tasks. Then he gives them the command to dismantle the ship so that the Sentinel can be fixed using its components. Hendricks asserts that he won't let them leave because staying here is their obligation, regardless if their tenure has finished. He even threatens to shoot them if they don't return to their work. The guys think that Hendricks has recently gone insane and are concerned about the current course of events. Cassidy offers to speak with him privately as a result. She lets the sergeant know later that day that she knows how he feels. It is revealed that Hendricks's prior unit was destroyed by mutiny. However, she persuades him to allow the two men to return to the base and provide the Sentinel with information. The following scene features Hendricks requesting an urgent meeting. He clarifies that Cassidy has made a compelling case for reporting to the base because they are not in contact, that he recommends that 2 remain and that the other 2 go. Hendricks is clearly staying, and Cassidy has also offered to stay. When Sullivan finds out that he is in love with Cassidy, Sullivan is devastated, but Baines is ecstatic to hear this. Hendricks discovers something startling when working on the map that evening. The relief ship was sailing directly for them. However, they started purposefully veering away from the Sentinel a few miles out. They eventually came to a stop far from their intended location, and the crew just vanished. Given that Cassidy was in charge of guiding the relief ship to them, Hendricks becomes suspicious. The crew rises the following morning to a loud alert. An additional ship has surfaced on the radar. The guys immediately take up their places to protect the Sentinel in response to this. Cassidy makes numerous unsuccessful attempts to contact the enigmatic ship. Hendricks gives the team the order to shoot down the ship and declines to send anyone else this time. Cassidy notices that the ship they grabbed earlier is disappeared as they are loading the gun. A little while later, the ship appears to be heading away from Sullivan and Baines, so they decide not to shoot. The Sentinel is surrounded by dense fog, making it difficult for them to see the craft. After realizing at last that it is their own ship, Cassidy heads over to warn them. However, Hendricks has already aimed his gun at Baines, so it's too late. Then it is revealed that the sergeant who didn't want anyone to leave was the one who allowed the ship to depart last night. Hendricks shoots his ear in retaliation after Baines continues to refuse to destroy the ship in spite of the information. Sullivan is compelled by this to seize control of the cannon and open fire on the ship. An enraged Baines attempts to pursue the sergeant after witnessing it being blasted to bits, but Cassidy uses a fire extinguisher to knock him unconscious beforehand. After that, Hendricks is imprisoned in the pantry and she retrieves both keys. Following the incident, Baines starts to experience depression since they no longer have any possibility of returning home. He starts drinking a lot and won't go back to his work. However, Sullivan informs Cassidy that they are forced to use every telegraph channel until they discover one that is working. Later in the afternoon, Sullivan wonders why the sergeant decided against going after he gives him some food. According to Hendricks, the relief ship arrived 3 months ago as scheduled. However, something caused it to walk away, indicating that one of them is a traitor who desires the nuclear bomb. When Sullivan learns this, he is astounded and won't accept the possibility that one of his buddies is a traitor. Then, despite Hendricks' cries for permission to leave, he walks away and locks the pantry door. After then, Sullivan sends SOS signals to every channel for the remainder of the day. Cassidy gives him a photo of herself and her family when she was a child later that evening. Even though she is the youngest child, she has the largest umbrella on this wet day in the shot. She sobs as she tells how the enemy killed her family while she was away at school. The following morning, Cassidy is found sleeping by himself in the communications room by an ecstatic and inebriated Bailey. He acts aggressively toward her, giving the impression that he wants to exploit her. However, he snatches the nuclear launch keys at the perfect time and flees. Next, Baines enters the communication room and announces over the speakers that he is about to set off the bomb. The other two are alarmed by this and make every effort to reassure him. They discuss how his family is awaiting his return home with much anticipation. He is also given the assurance by the pair that they will all survive this. After hearing this, Baines sobs and eventually takes his hands off the controls, allowing Cassidy to get both keys. Sullivan believes it's appropriate to let Hendricks go after the butterflies disappeared. The surprising revelation from Baines is that he discovered Hendricks missing when he attempted to access the pantry earlier. A window that was open suggested that he had called it quits. Cassidy and Sullivan are shocked to discover that their sergeant is truly missing when they open the pantry. After a few days, the staff starts to carry out their responsibilities. Baines is also doing well, and he works on the Sentinel's repair for the majority of the day. Bailey and Cassidy make the afternoon decision to investigate the ship's wreckage in order to recover any essential items. Cassidy gives Sullivan a kiss of gratitude after he provides her a gun as a backup. Shortly after, Sullivan makes the decision to give lower deck fishing another go. However, he finds Hendricks dead with a bullet wound to his skull as he pulls up the net. This indicates that he was slain by someone, and that one of them is a true traitor. Cassidy is constructing a sinister scheme as he looks at Baines in the boat while he rushes to look for information on his friends' profiles. A storm soon starts to build, so Sullivan goes outside to check the beacon. He affirms that it is detachable and movable. A flashback then reveals that Cassidy was the one who stole the beacon in a boat. Rather than going to the Sentinel, she forced the relief ship to follow her. She also killed the team and allowed the ship to drift away after they had gotten a safe distance away. Only Cassidy returns from the brief voyage to the present. She claims that while attempting to collect some plastic, Baines stumbled and died by accident. Sullivan surmises right away that she was the traitor all along and that she killed him. He's afraid to speak up yet though, so the two wind up sharing a bed. Cassidy wakes up the following morning and discovers she is alone herself in bed. Abruptly, Sullivan uses the walkie-talkie to communicate with her, telling her that he is aware that she killed everyone. In addition, he says she is spying for the opposition and swears he won't give the explosives to her. Cassidy then rushes to the communications room after realizing she is missing the keys. She discovers Sullivan there halfway through setting off the bomb. It doesn't bother him to blow up the future since they don't have one. They were still within the Sentinel. Cassidy tries to explain that she detested lying to him and that people are suffering in her native country. The bomb is set off by the private who doesn't think she's telling the truth. But rather than blowing up, the machine flashes a silly little sentence that Baines enjoyed saying again. They come to understand that Bailey had altered the bomb's programming to prevent anyone from using it for harm as a result. Cassidy and Sullivan have a brief conversation in the last scene. They decide that they will stick together to defend the Sentinel and continue to live, regardless of whether side wins the conflict.